World's richest trafficker buys single mother at an auction to have a child. Hey there, I'm Alex, your guide through today's extraordinary tale on Hearts of Crime. What you're about to witness is a story of passion and danger that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, when I say the twist at the end will leave you absolutely speechless. If you enjoy these forbidden love stories, please hit that like button and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily uploads of these incredible stories. Stay with me until the very end. I promise the conclusion will shock you in ways you can't imagine. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. Have a wonderful day, and may God bless you and your family. The black Bentley purred to a stop at the red light, its tinted windows concealing the man inside from the world he ruled. Marcus Cole drummed his fingers against the leather steering wheel, impatient with the delay. Time was money, and Marcus had plenty of the latter because he never wasted the former. Rain pelted the windshield, blurring the figures huddled at the corner. A woman and two small children, drenched and desperate, holding a cardboard sign that was disintegrating in the downpour. Marcus normally wouldn't have given them a second glance. The streets of this city were full of unfortunates, and he hadn't built his empire by distributing charity. But something caught his eye. A flash of familiar movement as the woman pushed wet hair from her face, the way she tilted her head. Despite the years of hardship etched into her features, Marcus knew that face. It was burned into his memory from another lifetime. Natalie. The name escaped his lips in a whisper, fogging the glass before him. Natalie Jenkins, his first love. The girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had taught him what happiness felt like long before he learned what power could do. The light turned green, but Marcus didn't move. Cars honked behind him. His security detail in the SUV following his Bentley radioed to ask if there was a problem. He ignored them all, pulling to the curb instead. "Sir?" His driver called from the front seat. "Is everything all right?" "Wait here," Marcus ordered, reaching for the door handle. "Sir, it is not safe to—" "I said wait." The rain soaked through his $10,000 suit in seconds as he approached the small family. The children, a boy and a girl, shrunk behind their mother, eyes wide with suspicion. They'd learned early that attention from strangers rarely meant anything good. Natalie didn't recognize him at first. When understanding dawned, her face went through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, disbelief, and then something darker, something like fear. "Marcus?" Her voice was hoarse, whether from disuse or the cold, he couldn't tell. "Natalie." He stood awkwardly, rain streaming down his face. What happened to you?" She laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. "Life happened. The same life that made you—" She gestured vaguely at his expensive clothes, the luxury car, the men watching from a distance. "These are your children?" he asked, looking at the little ones clinging to her legs. The boy had her eyes. The girl had her chin. "Yes." "Their father?" "Gone." Say the word held volumes, whether dead, imprisoned, or simply vanished. She didn't elaborate. Marcus made a decision then, one that would alter the course of multiple lives. "Come with me," he said. "All of you." "Why would I do that?" Her eyes narrowed with suspicion, and he was reminded of the fierce, proud girl he'd known, the one who'd never taken handouts, even when they both had nothing. "Because it's raining. Because those children are freezing. Because—" He paused, unable to articulate the storm of emotions her appearance had unleashed. "Because I owe you." Something in his voice must have reached her, or perhaps it was simply the violent shiver that ran through her younger child. "One meal," she conceded. "Somewhere warm. That's all." That one meal became dinner at Marcus S. Penthouse, which became an offer of the guest suite, just for tonight, which eventually stretched into days. Marcus S. staff were puzzled by the sudden appearance of a destitute woman and her children in their employer S. meticulously controlled world, but no one dared question it. The children, William and Rebecca, gradually lost their wary expressions as they discovered the wonders of hot baths, comfortable beds, and regular meals. Natalie remained cautious, watching Marcus with guarded eyes as he interacted with her children, offering them toys and books, but never pushing for their affection. "Why are you doing this?" she asked him one evening, after the children had gone to bed. They sat on his balcony overlooking the glittering city, drinking wine that cost more than she used to make in a month. "I told you. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything, Marcus. We were kids." He studied the city lights, remembering. "You believed in me when no one else did. You saw something in me worth loving." He turned to face her. "And then I left you behind." The truth hung between them. Marcus Cole hadn't always been a millionaire with criminal connections and a legitimate business empire as a front. Once he'd been just another hungry kid from the same poor neighborhood as Natalie, dreaming of escape. "You had ambition. I knew you'd leave eventually," she said quietly, but not like that, not without a word. Shame, an emotion he thought long buried, rose in his throat. "I took the money and ran. I didn't look back, because I was afraid if I did, I might stay. And now look at you." Her eyes traveled over him, taking in the tailored clothes, the confident posture, the hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there when they were young. "You've become exactly what you wanted." "Have I?" The question was honest. For the first time in years, Marcus was examining the foundations of the life he'd built. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. Marcus frowned at the screen, then stood abruptly. "I have to take this. Business." The persona of the ruthless businessman slipped back into place like a well-worn coat. "We'll talk more tomorrow." Natalie nodded, knowing better than to ask questions, but her eyes followed him, thoughtful and somehow sad. What Natalie didn't know, what Marcus had carefully concealed, was the exact nature of his business. The legitimate real estate development company that bore his name was only the public face of his operations. Behind it lay a network of more questionable enterprises. Money laundering, protection rackets, high-interest loans to desperate people, and strategic investments in politicians who looked the other way. The call that night was from Peter, his right-hand man with news of a problem. A journalist had been asking uncomfortable questions about Marcus' connections to certain city officials and the suspiciously expedited approvals for his latest development project. "Handle it," Marcus said tersely into the phone, aware that Natalie might overhear if he spoke too specifically. "The usual way." "Are you sure, boss?" Peter sounded hesitant. "This one is pretty high profile. Might bring more heat than it's worth." "I said handle it." Marcus ended the call, unaware that his order would set in motion events that would soon threaten everything, including his unexpected reunion with Natalie. Over the following days, as the journalist in question mysteriously backed off his investigation, after an unfortunate accident left him with 2 broken fingers, Marcus found himself increasingly drawn into the strange new world that had formed in his home. He watched with fascination as William carefully built elaborate structures with the building blocks Marcus had purchased, showing unexpected patience and creativity. He listened to Rebecca's enthusiastic but jumbled stories, marveling at how someone so small could contain so much energy. And always he watched Natalie, the way she fiercely protected her children while trying to maintain her dignity in circumstances she clearly found uncomfortable, the way she still bit her lip when she was worried, just as she had when they were teenagers. The way she was clearly trying to form an exit plan, even as she allowed her children this brief respite in luxury. Marcus knew she was planning to leave. He'd built his empire on being able to read people, to anticipate their moves before they made them. He saw it in the way she squirreled away the food he told her she could take from the kitchen, in the way she asked casual questions about bus routes, in the maps she studied when she thought no one was looking. And he found, to his surprise, that he couldn't bear the thought of losing her again, of losing all 3 of them. These strangers who had suddenly appeared in his life had awakened something he'd thought long dead, the capacity to care about someone other than himself. One night he found Natalie sitting alone in the darkened kitchen, staring at nothing. "You were planning to leave," he said, not a question but a statement. She didn't deny it. "We don't belong here, Marcus. This..." She gestured at the opulent surroundings. "This isn't real life. Not for us." It could be. The words surprised him as much as her. "What are you saying?" "Stay, not as my guests, as..." He struggled to define what he was offering. "As family." Natalie's laugh was soft but incredulous. "Family? Marcus, we don't even know each other anymore. The kids and I can just slot into your life like some ready-made family from a catalogue. Then let me get to know you again, he pressed, taking a seat across from her. The real you, not just my memories, and let me show you who I've become. Her expression darkened. I'm not sure I want to know who you've become, Marcus. I see how people look at you, with fear. I hear the phone calls you take in private. I notice the men who follow you everywhere. She leaned forward. What exactly do you do now? Where did all this money really come from? The question hung in the air between them, a challenge and a test. Marcus had the sudden unsettling feeling that how he answered might determine the course of whatever future they might have. Before he could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. Mum? I had a bad dream. William stood there in pajamas too big for him, his face tear-streaked in the dim light. The conversation halted as Natalie immediately went to comfort her son, gathering him in her arms and whispering reassurances. Marcus watched them, feeling like an intruder in his own home. The simplicity of a mother's love for her child struck him as something pure in a way his world hadn't been for a very long time. As Natalie carried William back to bed, she paused in the doorway, looking back at Marcus with an unreadable expression. We'll talk tomorrow, she said quietly, about everything. Marcus nodded, knowing that tomorrow would indeed bring a reckoning, one that would force him to confront truths about himself he'd long preferred to ignore, because for the first time in years he found himself caring about what someone else thought of him, caring about whether he measured up not in terms of wealth or power, but in the only currency that had ever really mattered to Natalie Jenkins, basic human decency. And as he sat alone in his kitchen, surrounded by all the trappings of his success, Marcus Cole, feared businessman, secret crime lord, and man who had everything, wondered if he had anything of real value to offer the woman who had once loved him. Dawn broke over the city, painting Marcus' penthouse in shades of gold. He hadn't slept. The conversation with Natalie had left him restless, pacing his office and staring out at the skyline as night slowly gave way to morning. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Peter stood there, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. You called for me, boss. Peter's eyes were watchful, noting Marcus' rumpled appearance and the untouched glass of whiskey on his desk. The journalist. What exactly did you do? Peter shifted uncomfortably. Fired just what you asked. Made sure he backed off. Sent a couple of the boys to have a conversation with him. And he got the message. Loud and clear. Peter's smile didn't reach his eyes. His editor called this morning to tell us he's been reassigned to sports coverage. The story is dead. Marcus nodded slowly. Once this news would have brought only satisfaction, another problem efficiently eliminated. Now he found himself thinking about the man behind the byline. Someone just doing his job. Someone with a family, perhaps. Someone who'd been hurt on his orders. From now on, Marcus said carefully, we find other ways to handle these situations. Peter's eyebrows rose. Other ways? Legal ways. Buy the paper if we have to. Offer exclusive interviews about our charitable initiatives. I don't care, just no more. He gestured vaguely. Physical persuasion. Is this because of the woman? Peter asked bluntly. The one with the kids. Marcus fixed him with a cold stare. This is because I said so. Peter had worked for Marcus long enough to know when to back down. He nodded once, sharply. Whatever you say, boss. Anything else? Yes, I need information on Natalie Jenkins, everything you can find. Where she has been since... Marcus paused, reluctant to reveal the personal connection. Since she arrived in the city, her husband or boyfriend. How she ended up on the street, everything. Consider it done. Peter turned to leave, then hesitated. Just one thing, boss. The Alvarez deal is closing today. They re-expecting you to be there personally. It is a big one. The Alvarez deal Marcus had almost forgotten. A major property acquisition that would cement his control over the waterfront district, with plans for luxury developments that would displace hundreds of low-income residents but triple his investment. The kind of ruthless business move that had built his empire. I'll be there, he said automatically, though for the first time he found himself questioning whether he wanted to be. After Peter left, Marcus showered and changed, donning the armor of an expensive suit and the confident demeanor that intimidated business rivals and city officials alike. By the time he emerged from his room, the household was awake. He found Natalie and the children in the kitchen. Rebecca was giggling as the chef, usually tasked with preparing Marcus's solitary meals, showed her how to flip pancakes. William sat at the counter, carefully arranging blueberries into patterns on his plate, and Natalie stood by the window with a cup of coffee, watching her children with a soft smile that transformed her face, erasing years of hardship. For a moment, Marcus simply observed them, struck by how they had breathed life into his sterile home. How long had it been since laughter had echoed through these rooms? Natalie spotted him first, her smile fading as she took in his business attire. "Tired to going out?" "Work," he replied, suddenly reluctant to elaborate on exactly what that work entailed. "I should be back this evening. We'll talk then." "As promised," she agreed, her eyes serious. "About everything." Marcus felt a flicker of anxiety at the emphasis she placed on that last word, but he nodded. "Will you be here when I get back?" The question revealed more vulnerability than he'd intended. Natalie seemed to recognize this, her expression softening slightly. "We'll be here," she said simply. Throughout the day, as Marcus moved through meetings and negotiations, he found his thoughts continually straying back to his penthouse and its temporary inhabitants. During the Alvarez contract signing, as champagne was poured and congratulations exchanged, he found himself staring at the architectural renderings of the luxury towers that would replace affordable housing units with a growing sense of disconnection. "To progress," Alvarez toasted, raising his glass. "To progress," the others echoed. Marcus raised his glass mechanically, but didn't to drink. By mid-afternoon, Peter cornered him in his office with a manila folder. "That information you wanted. On the Jenkins woman." Marcus took the folder but didn't open it immediately. "Tell me the highlights." Peter's expression was carefully neutral. "It's not pretty. Husband died from cancer a few years back. No insurance. Medical bills wiped out their savings. She lost their apartment, then her job when the company downsized. Been working various minimum wage positions, staying with relatives until she wore out her welcome. Ended up in a shelter for a while, then on the street when the shelter closed due to funding cuts." He paused. "Ironic thing is, that shelter was in one of the buildings your company bought last year, the one you converted to luxury condos." The information hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had displaced Natalie and her children, not directly, not knowingly, but his business practices, the same ones that had built his fortune, had contributed to their suffering. "There is more," Peter continued, oblivious to Marcus's internal turmoil. "The shelter where they were staying before that? It was funded by a local businessman named Howard Grant. Ring any bells?" It did. Howard Grant had been one of Marcus's competitors, until Marcus had systematically destroyed his business through a combination of legal maneuvering and less-than-legal intimidation tactics. Grant had eventually sold his properties to Marcus at a fraction of their worth and left the city. So the philanthropic projects Grant was funding, like that shelter, lost their backing, Peter concluded. "Just another piece of collateral damage in the game." "The game," Marcus repeated softly. "Business," Peter clarified with a shrug. "You always said everyone knows the rules when they sit down to play." Marcus stared out the window at the city sprawled below, seeing it suddenly through different eyes. A city where Natalie and her children had been forced to sleep on the streets because of decisions he had made, moves in a game where he had never bothered to consider the human cost. "Cancel my afternoon meetings," he said abruptly. "All of them. But the zoning commission can wait." Marcus stood, gathering his coat. "There is something more important I need to take care of." Peter looked concerned. "Boss, you have been acting strange ever since that woman showed up. If she is some kind of con artist trying to play on your sympathies—" "She's not," Marcus cut him off harshly, "and my personal life is none of your concern." "It is when it affects business," Peter countered boldly. "The organization depends on your judgment, your clarity. If that's compromised—" "Careful, Peter." Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous softness. "Don't forget who you were talking to." The warning hung in the air between them, For a moment, Peter looked as if he might press the issue, but self-preservation won out. He nodded stiffly and stepped aside. As Marcus's car pulled away from his office building, his phone buzzed with messages from confused business associates and demanding clients. He ignored them all, directing his driver instead to a different part of the city, to a neighborhood he had deliberately avoided for many years. The old neighborhood hadn't changed much. Still run down, still struggling, though the specific businesses had shifted. The corner store where he once bought candy with stolen coins was now a vape shop. The playground where he first kissed Natalie was still there, though the equipment was more rusted, the chain-link fence more bent. Marcus instructed his driver to wait, and walked alone through streets that had once been the boundaries of his world. He passed the building where he'd grown up, now condemned with boards over the windows. He paused outside what had once been Natalie's apartment building, remembering summer evenings on the fire escape, dreaming of escape. They had been so young, so full of plans. Natalie had wanted to become a teacher, to help children like themselves see possibilities beyond these cramped streets. He had wanted money, power, respect, all the things he lacked growing up here. And he achieved those goals, hadn't he? But at what cost? A group of children ran past him, laughing and shouting. One bumped against him, startling back with wide eyes at the sight of his expensive clothes, so out of place here. "Sorry, mister," the child mumbled before darting away. Marcus watched them go, struck by how easily that could have been William or Rebecca, if he hadn't recognized Natalie that rainy night. By the time he returned to his penthouse, evening was falling. He found Natalie in the library, curled up with a book. She looked up as he entered, marking her place with a finger. "You're back earlier than I expected," she observed. "Son, I went to see the old neighborhood today," he said without preamble, setting down his briefcase. Surprise flickered across her face. "Why?" "I am not sure." He loosened his tie, suddenly uncomfortable in the formal attire. "I needed to remember, I think, where we came from, who we were." "And did you remember?" "Some things." He joined her on the couch, maintaining a respectful distance. "I remembered that you wanted to be a teacher." A sad smile touched her lips. "I was for a while. After you left. I finished school, got my degree, taught elementary students for almost 5 years. What happened? Life happened. I met James, the children's father. We married, had William, then Rebecca. He was a good man." Her voice softened with memory. "A construction worker, hard-working. When he got sick, we thought it was just overwork at first. By the time they diagnosed the cancer, it was already advanced." Marcus listened silently as she recounted the slow disintegration of her life after her husband's death. The medical bills, the loss of their home, the increasingly desperate measures to keep her children fed and sheltered. "The last shelter we stayed in closed without warning," she continued. "Something about funding cuts and property changing hands. We had nowhere to go." She looked at him directly. "That was 3 days before you found us on that street corner." Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. The details Peter had uncovered burned in his mind, his indirect but undeniable role in her suffering. "Natalie," he began hesitantly, "there's something I need to tell you. About my business. About who I've become." Before he could continue, the library door burst open. Rebecca stood there in pajamas, her small face flushed with excitement. "Mom, William and I found a movie about unicorns on the big TV. Come watch with us." Natalie smiled apologetically at Marcus. "Duty calls. Can we finish this conversation after they're asleep?" He nodded, both relieved and anxious about the reprieve. "Go, enjoy the unicorns." As she followed her daughter from the room, Natalie paused. "Join us if you want. The children have been asking about you all day." The invitation surprised him. "They have? William wants to know if you will teach him to tie a tie like yours. And Rebecca has a list of questions that would exhaust an FBI interrogator." Her smile turned wry. "Fair warning." After she left, Marcus sat alone in the library, contemplating the choice before him. He could join this makeshift family gathering, step tentatively into the warm circle of their lives, or he could retreat to his office, to the familiarity of work and power and the cold comfort of control. For the first time in years, Marcus chose the unfamiliar path. The next hours passed in a blur of animated unicorns, popcorn, and children's laughter. Rebecca, overcoming her initial shyness, bombarded Marcus with questions about everything from his car to why the sky is blue. William, more reserved, nevertheless edged closer throughout the evening, until he was leaning against Marcus's side, half asleep. Natalie watched it all with a guarded expression that gradually softened as she observed Marcus's gentle patience with her children. When Rebecca insisted on teaching him a clapping game and he complied with surprising good humor, Natalie's unexpected laughter filled the room, a sound so genuine it momentarily took his breath away. Later, after the children were tucked into bed, Marcus and Natalie found themselves once again alone in the library. The comfortable atmosphere of the evening evaporated, replaced by the weight of unspoken truths. "You were going to tell me something," Natalie prompted, settling into an armchair across from him. "About your business, about who you've become." Marcus poured himself a drink for courage, offering one to Natalie, which she declined. He took a deep breath. "The company that bears my name, Cole Enterprises, specializes in real estate development. We buy properties, renovate or demolish them, build luxury housing or commercial spaces, and sell for profit." He paused. "It is all legal on paper. And off paper?" Natalie asked quietly. "Off paper there are other revenue streams, protection fees from local businesses, interest from loans to people who can qualify for bank credit, partnerships with certain city officials who expedite our permit processes in exchange for considerations." He met her eyes directly. "I am not just a businessman, Natalie. I run what some would call a criminal organization." What he expected: shock, disgust, perhaps fear. Instead, Natalie nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. The way your staff defer to you, the cryptic phone calls, the men who follow you everywhere." She leaned forward. "The real question is, do you hurt people?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. "Not physically. Not usually." He thought of the journalist with broken fingers. Property damage sometimes. Threats, yes, but murder? No. He hesitated. "Though I cannot promise some of my associates haven't crossed that line without my knowledge. And you re comfortable with that distinction?" There was no judgment in her tone, only curiosity. "I was," he answered honestly, "until recently." "What changed?" "You did." The words fell between them like stones in still water. "Seeing you again, meeting your children, learning what happened to you." He set down his glass. "Natalie, there is something else you should know. The shelter you stayed in, the one that closed, it was on property my company acquired." Her expression remained unreadable. "You saying you responsible for us ending up on the street?" "Indirectly, yes." The admission felt like tearing open a wound. "And the businessman whose charitable foundation funded that shelter before it closed? Howard Grant." "I drove him out of business." Now there was a flash of something in her eyes, anger perhaps, or pain. "So you were telling me that our paths crossing again wasn't a just chance," she said slowly. "It was consequence. Your actions helped create the circumstances that put me and my children on that street corner where you found us." Put that way, the irony was devastating. "Yes." Natalie stood abruptly, pacing to the window. For a long moment she stood with her back to him, shoulders rigid. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked, not turning around. "Guilt, confession, some kind of twisted attempt at honesty?" "Because you deserve the truth," Marcus replied, "and because—" he struggled to find the words. "Because I want to change. I need to change. And I don't think I can do it without you." She turned then, her expression fierce. "I am not your redemption story, Marcus. My children and I aren't characters in some morality tale where the ruthless businessman learns to be human again." "I know that," he said quickly. "That is not what I am asking." "What are you asking then?" "For a chance, to make amends, not just to you, but to this city, to use what I've built for something better than just accumulating more wealth and power." He stood, approaching her cautiously. "And yes, for a chance with you, with all of you. Not because I think I deserve it, but because I want to earn it." Natalie studied him, her gaze penetrating. Pretty words. But people like you done to change overnight, Marcus. No, he agreed. They don tea, but they can start to. Before she could respond, the penthouse security system chimed, indicating someone at the private elevator. Marcus frowned. He wasn't a tea expecting anyone, and visitors couldn't tea access his floor without security clearance. His phone buzzed with a text from Peter. Emergency coming up now. Wait here, he told Natalie, moving toward the foyer. The elevator doors opened to reveal Peter, his normally composed face tight with tension. We have a problem. It couldn't wait until morning? No. Peter glanced past him, seeming to note Natalie's presence in the library doorway. He lowered his voice. As about Dominguez. As making a move against us. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Antonio Dominguez was his chief rival in the city's underworld, a man even more ruthless than Marcus had ever been. What kind of move? One of our warehouses was hit tonight. Merchandise stolen. 2 guards in the hospital. Peter's eyes were hard. This isn't to business anymore, boss. It's war. The words hung in the air between them, and Marcus was acutely aware of Natalie listening from the doorway, of the children sleeping down the hall, of the violent reality of his world, suddenly intruding on the fragile new possibility he'd been reaching for. Gather everyone at the usual place, Marcus said tersely. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Peter nodded and returned to the elevator. When the doors closed, Marcus turned to find Natalie watching him with a new wariness in her eyes. You have to go, she said. Not a question. Yes. He moved toward his office to retrieve his gun from the safe, a precaution he suddenly couldn't avoid. I am sorry. This is complicated. Complicated, she repeated, the word hollow. Is that what you call it when people get hurt? When your business rivals attack your warehouse? The quotation marks around the last word were audible in her tone. Marcus paused, one hand on his office door. Natalie, I know how this looks, but I have responsibilities. People who depend on me for their livelihoods, for their safety. So do I, she said quietly. 2 small people down that hallway who deserve better than to be caught in the crossfire of whatever this is. The implication was clear. If Marcus chose to respond to violence with violence, he was choosing a path that couldn't include Natalie and her children. Give me time, he said. Just a little time to handle this situation, to find another way. Her expression softened slightly. There was always another way, Marcus. That is something I had to learn when everything fell apart. The question is whether you are willing to look for it, even when the easy path is right in front of you. With those words echoing in his mind, Marcus left the penthouse, descending into the night and the dangerous game he played for so long, a game whose rules suddenly seemed hollow and whose prizes had lost their luster. What he didn't know as the elevator doors closed was that fate had one more twist in store, a connection between Natalie's past and his present that would force him to make choices that would define not only his future, but the futures of all those he had come to care about. Marcus arrived at the abandoned warehouse that served as his organization's emergency meeting place to find his lieutenants already gathered. Faces grim, weapons visible, they waited for his command. What do we know? Marcus asked Peter, ignoring the expectant looks. Dominguez is making a play for our territory. The warehouse hit was just a message. Peter spread photos across the table, images of damage, injured men, spray-painted warnings. He thinks you've gone soft. Has word gotten out about the woman and her kids? Marcus kept his voice neutral. Peter hesitated before answering. There is talk. People notice things. The implication was clear. In their world, personal attachments were vulnerabilities to be exploited. By taking in Natalie and her children, Marcus had painted targets on their backs. So, what is the play, boss? Asked Ryan, Marcus's most aggressive lieutenant. Hit them back twice as hard? Send a message? The old Marcus would have agreed without hesitation. Violence met with greater violence. It was the language of their business. But Natalie's words lingered. There is always another way. No, Marcus said finally. No more escalation. Confusion rippled through the room. So we just let them walk all over us? Ryan challenged. I didn't say that. Marcus straightened his shoulders, decision made. I am ending this permanently. You mean take out Dominguez? Peter clarified, eyes widening. I mean end the war before it begins. Marcus pulled out his phone. Everyone out, except Peter. I need privacy. Reluctantly, the others filed out, leaving Marcus alone with his right-hand man. Who are you calling? Peter asked warily. An old friend. Marcus dialed a number he rarely used, waiting as it rang. Judge Harmon, the one who helped us with the zoning issues last year. Understanding dawned on Peter S.'s face. You going to the authorities? Not exactly. The call connected. Judge Harmon? Marcus Cole. I need a favor, the biggest one yet. The conversation was brief but intense. When Marcus hung up, his expression was resolute. Tonight I need every piece of evidence we have on Dominguez IS operation, every transaction, every criminal connection, every illegal deal and payoff. He fixed Peter with a determined stare. We are going to offer it all to the District Attorney S office, anonymously. That S suicide, Peter breathed. If Dominguez goes down, he could take us with him. Not if we make a clean break first. Marcus moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Starting tomorrow, Cole Enterprises goes legitimate, completely. We exit every criminal enterprise, pay off every debt, cut ties with every corrupt official. You can be serious. I said I've never been more serious in my life. But why? Peter S. bewilderment was genuine. Everything we built is meaningless, Marcus interrupted. If it can be threatened by one rival, if it puts innocent people at risk. He turned to face Peter. If it comes at the cost of everything else that matters. Peter studied him for a long moment. It is her, isn't it? The woman. She is changed you. She reminded me of who I was before all this. Marcus gestured around them. Before I convinced myself that power was the only form of security. And what if she leaves anyway? Peter challenged. What if you give up everything and she still walks away? The question hit its mark, striking at Marcus's deepest fear, but his resolve didn't waver. Then I'll have to live with that. He squared his shoulders. But at least I'll be someone my younger self would not despise. Dawn was breaking when Marcus returned to his penthouse. He found Natalie in the kitchen, already dressed, a small suitcase by her feet. You will be leaving, he said, unsurprised. Sorry, I was going to wait until you got back, she replied, to say goodbye properly. The children? Still sleeping. She fidgeted with her coffee cup. I thought it would be easier this way, cleaner. Marcus nodded, accepting her decision even as it pained him. Where will you go? My sister S for now. She has an hour outside the city. She has been reaching out, trying to reconcile. Natalie raised her chin. We'll be fine, Marcus. We always find a way. I know you will. He moved closer, careful not to crowd her. But before you go, there is something you should know. About last night. About what I've done. Concern flickered in her eyes. Are you in trouble? The opposite, actually. He managed a tired smile. And I'm getting out. Completely. Turning evidence on my rivals, shutting down the criminal side of my business, going legitimate. Surprise registered on her face. Why? Because you were right. There is always another way. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. It won't be easy. There will be financial repercussions, legal complications possibly, but it is the right thing to do. For who? She asked quietly. For me, he answered honestly. For the man I want to be. The man I should have been all along. He paused. For William and Rebecca, who deserve to know that people can change, that mistakes aren't destinies. His voice softened. And yes, for you, though I don't expect it to change your decision. Natalie was silent for a long moment, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. What will you do next? Rebuild, properly this time. His vision was clear now, possibilities spreading before him. Use my resources for real development, not just luxury properties that drive out communities. Create housing people can actually afford. Fund programs like the shelter that helped you. A small smile touched her lips. Sounds like you've given this some thought. I had a good teacher once, he said, holding her gaze. Someone who believed people were more important than profit, who taught me to see beyond myself. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken history and tentative possibility. "Mom," William's sleepy voice interrupted as he padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Why is your suitcase out?" But Natalie knelt to his level, brushing hair from his forehead. "We are going to visit Aunt Lisa for a while, sweetheart." "But I like it here," William protested. "Marcus was going to teach me chess today." "Was he?" Natalie glanced up at Marcus, who nodded. "I promised him yesterday," he explained, "though I understand if you need to leave." Rebecca appeared in the doorway then, already fully dressed and alert. "Are we leaving?" she asked, her sharp eyes taking in the suitcase and the adults' serious expressions. "We were going to," Natalie admitted, "but now I'm not so sure." Hope flickered in Marcus's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "The choice is yours, Natalie, no pressure. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it." She stood facing him directly. "If we stayed, what would that look like? Where would we fit in your life?" "Wherever you want," he answered earnestly. "I have a house outside the city, quieter, safer, with a garden for the children, or we could find somewhere new, start fresh." He took a chance, stepping closer. "All I know is that finding you again has given me a second chance I never thought I'd have, and I don't want to waste it." "A second chance," as she repeated softly, glancing at her children. "We could all use one of those." Rebecca tugged at her mother's hand. "Can we stay, Mum, please? I like Marcus. He doesn't talk to me like I am a baby." "High praise indeed," Natalie murmured, a smile playing at her lips. Marcus knelt to the children's level. "If your mum decides we should try this, whatever this is, I want you both to know something important. I'm not trying to replace your father. He'll always be your dad, and from what your mum has told me, he was a wonderful man who loved you very much." William nodded solemnly. "Dad's in heaven, but Mum says it is okay to have other people who care about us too." "Very wise," Marcus agreed, glancing up at Natalie, whose eyes shimmered with emotion. She took a deep breath. "We could stay, for a little while, see how it goes." The joy that surged through Marcus was unlike anything he felt in years, pure and uncomplicated by the calculations of advantage that had governed his life for so long. "I'd like that," he said simply. The investigation into Antonio Dominguez's criminal empire dominated the city's headlines for months. With the evidence Marcus had provided, prosecutors built an airtight case that eventually expanded to include several corrupt officials and business leaders. Marcus himself was never implicated, though coal enterprises underwent significant restructuring. He divested from developments that would displace residents, instead focusing on affordable housing initiatives and community revitalization projects. The transition cost him financially, but the wealth he'd accumulated provided sufficient cushion. True to his word, he moved Natalie and the children to his country house, a spacious but unpretentious property with room for them all to breathe. William discovered a passion for the garden, spending hours cultivating vegetables and flowers. Rebecca thrived at her new school, her natural intelligence flourishing with proper support. As for Natalie and Marcus, they rebuilt their relationship carefully, mindful of the years and experiences that had shaped them into different people than the teenagers who had once dreamed together on a fire escape. They found new common ground in their commitment to the children's well-being and to making something meaningful of their unexpected reunion. On a warm evening, almost a year after their chance encounter on that rainy street corner, Marcus and Natalie sat on the porch swing, watching William and Rebecca chase fireflies across the lawn. "I had a call from the foundation today," Natalie said, leaning comfortably against his shoulder. "The new shelter opens next month. They want me to run the education program for the residents." "And you should do it," Marcus encouraged. "You'd be perfect." She nodded. "I think I will. It feels right, coming full circle like that." Speaking of full circle, Marcus reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small, worn object. "I found this when we were clearing out some old boxes." Natalie gasped softly as he handed her a tarnished silver ring, a simple band with a tiny, imperfect stone. "You kept it all these years?" "It was all I took with me when I left," he admitted. The ring I promised would someday be replaced with a real diamond when I made something of myself. His expression turned rueful. I thought money and power were what would make me worthy of you. I was wrong. Yes, you were, she agreed, but her tone was gentle. It took you long enough to figure that out. Better late than never, he suggested, with a hopeful smile. She studied the ring, turning it in her fingers. You know, this might actually fit Rebecca now. She loves vintage things. I was thinking, Marcus said carefully, that maybe it could serve a different purpose. He met her eyes. Not as an engagement ring, we were not ready for that, but as a promise. That this time I am not going anywhere. Natalie's smile was bright enough to rival the setting sun. I think that sounds like a very good promise. She slipped the ring onto her right hand, and this time I believe you'll keep it. Around them the summer evening hummed with possibility. William called out triumphantly, having captured a firefly in his cupped hands. Rebecca ran to see, her laughter floating across the lawn, and in the glow of twilight, two people who had lost and found each other against impossible odds watched the family they were building. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and precious, and wholly theirs. For Marcus Cole, who had once measured his worth in dollars and feared any sign of weakness, the greatest strength he'd ever shown was in choosing love over power. In recognizing that sometimes the most valuable second chances come disguised as rain-soaked encounters on ordinary street corners, where the past and future collide to create something entirely new. And for Natalie Jenkins, who had endured loss and hardship with unwavering courage, the greatest victory wasn't in being rescued, but in helping someone else find their way back to their better self, proof that sometimes love isn't just about who we become together, but who we help each other remember we always were. Wow, I told you that ending would be unexpected. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up and share your reactions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Hearts of Crime for more captivating stories, just like this one every single day. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible tale of love in the criminal underworld. Thank you for watching until the end. May God bless you and your family, and I'll see you in the next video.